Good morning, Dan and Amy. Obama gives his farewell speech appropriately in Chicago, the worst governed city in America, with the highest per capita murder rate. But one of the highest, certainly.
Yeah, and doors open 3 hours early. They open at 5 p.m.
So
People
much to
already
go
lining
over.
up. Yeah, I know. And I'm going over at Craigslist right now, all the tickets that are for sale. $2,500. Somebody's trying to sell a pair for $6,000.
Is that Michelle O, by any chance? The ticket
Oh,
seller?
somebody in South Shore is trying to sell some for $3,000. It's just amazing, all these ticket prices. So all those people that stood in line were just trying to make money.
Well, there's a lot to cover over 8 years, of course. I mean, there's the sale of guns to Mexican drug lords. There's the use of the IRS as a tool of oppression against people with different political or religious beliefs. I'm
that's
sure that'll
right.
be covered. The
Well, what
targeting of journalists like James Rosen by
What-
the Justice Department. That'll be. But then there's also of course, I mean, the signature accomplishment of his administration. It's Obamacare.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he was previewing his view on that signature accomplishment now that it is under assault by the incoming president of the United States, as well as continued assault by congressional Republicans. But now they are in a position to actually do something about it. Making the rounds over the weekend was President Obama, and look, he's willing to listen to anybody who's got a better idea than he advanced via Obamacare. This is President Obama in a Vox.com forum.
If, in fact, there's going to be a massive undoing of what's 1/6 of our economy, then the Republicans need to put forward very specific ideas about how they're going to do it. People need to be able to debate it. They need to be able to study it the same way they did when we passed the Affordable Care Act, and let the American people gauge, is this going to result in something better than what Obamacare has produced? And if they're so convinced that they can do it better, they shouldn't be afraid to make that presentation. It is really interesting to try to figure out, why is it that they're trying to rush the repeal so quick? I mean, what is it that they're afraid of? Why wouldn't they want to say, here's our plan, and show side by side, here's why our plan is better than what Obamacare has produced? Because they have said absolutely, adamantly, that they can do it better. I am saying to every Republican right now, if you, in fact, can put a plan together that is demonstrably better than what Obamacare is doing, I will publicly support repealing Obamacare and replacing it with your plan.
I mean, it's just the hysterical. He really is the sophist in chief. There's so much there, beginning with this idea that a takeover of 1/6 of our economy is something not to be done without thought and care. Well, that's what Obamacare did. It was a backdoor takeover of 1/6 of our economy. Now he's suggesting, hey, you're talking about 1/6 of our economy. And it was hotly debated. It was hotly debated by the people who said we have to pass it to find out what's in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The Republican proposals that were discarded, it was passed in a strict party line vote. And then this last thing, and he keeps doing, I mean, in addition saying, if they can come up with a better plan, I'll publicly support it. How comical.
Yeah,
but
and then he's calling it Trump care.
Right.
So-
You call it Trump care. I don't care.
Yeah.
I have no pride of
Yeah.
authorship. I wouldn't have pride of authorship in Obamacare either. So I understand that. But here's the other thing. If you can cover more people, well, you could have a government takeover, formal government takeover, single payer, which is ultimately where the left wants to go, and quote unquote cover more people. But you see, it's not about covering more people without taking into consideration things like quality of care, choice of care, cost of care. So all that 90-second riff you heard is one disingenuous trope after another. And unfortunately, tonight, I fear you're going to hear 90 minutes of disingenuous tropes, one after the other. But for more on the Obamacare repeal, as well as the farewell speech and the transition to a new administration. We're happy to be joined again by our friend Tevi Troy. He's a former Deputy Secretary for Health and Human Services. He's also the author of the book, Shall We Wake the President? 2 Centuries of Disaster Management from the Oval Office. Tevi, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, I'm happy to be on, but you don't need me because you're doing great talking about Obamacare and the farewell speech. You're cracking me up.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so enough of me, the dancing monkey over here. Let's get to a serious policy person. And what about this debate that's even going on within conservative and Republican circles, this repeal and then the replacement, whether it's Tom Price's legislation or some facsimile of it, that will come in the next couple of months. Do you think it needs to be packaged together, or can there be a little gap so that Republicans keep that promise that's so important and use that as the lever to introduce the replacement?
What you're talking about, Dan, really is a tactical question of whether they can find some way to get the thing done together, or you should just use the procedural method of reconciliation to get rid of Obamacare with only 50-plus votes in the Senate, and then work to put together a replacement that includes something to get over the 60-vote hurdle. And remember, there's 10 Democrats who are in Trump-won states who are up for re-election in 2018. So I think there is some room to get bipartisanship, and I think bipartisanship would be a good thing in that Obamacare, as you said, was passed with no Republican votes, and that's why the American people aren't accepting it. If you had a bipartisan alternative, then we would have something that would be lasting.
So what is the plan? I mean, how will Republicans replace Obamacare?
Well, the plans, you mentioned Dr. Price, and he has been working on legislation for multiple years, but it includes a number of ideas that Republicans have talked about for a long time. It includes health savings accounts, purchasing of insurance across state lines, association health plans so you can get tax benefits for getting health care, not just through your employer, but through other ways as well, such as your union, your civic association, your religious organization, and then also tort reform, which would save over $50 billion over 10 years. And CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, scored a plan along these lines in 2009 when Obama didn't want to hear it because there was a Republican plan, but CBO said that a plan along those lines would reduce the cost of premiums. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to increase access by making it cheaper and more affordable, not by forcing people to do it and subsidizing them if they do it.
So, I mean, as somebody who is inside HHS and that bureaucracy, you know, we wish things were a light switch and it would go from thought and passage to implementation that quickly, but it doesn't happen that quickly. You know, realistically, just to kind of temper people's expectations, how quickly can we dig this up from the roots and then, transition with as little disruption as possible to more of a market-oriented health insurance system in the country, the way that Dr. Tom Price has envisioned, or again, close approximations of that vision?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, Dan, because there's two issues of transition, and they seem to get conflated. One is the period between when you repeal it and then when you pass replacement, if you want to go that path. That would be a transition period. But also there's the position from when you repeal it and have the replacement and when the replacement actually takes effect. And it seems to me that 2 years would probably be enough time. Maybe if you want to be extra cautious, take 3. The government, as you know and as you were saying, is not always that quick about things. The Obamacare launch was not so well done, as you know, and the government computer folks aren't the best. So giving it 3 years might be a little better than a 2-year approach, but I would think in that window, 2 to 3 years.
And so, I mean, just to put a fine point on that, so 2 to 3 years, so people need to contemplate the idea that they're going to be dealing with, Obamacare in practice for the next 24 months before you can really transition to something that that is going to provide more choice and drive down cost and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, even if you passed the repeal tomorrow, you couldn't necessarily start a new system that same day because the insurance plans take a while not only to develop, but they have to be advertised and people have to take them up. So it does take a little time, and I think that makes sense. But that doesn't mean you can't make that transition to what you guys were saying, which is more affordable, more accessible, and higher quality care.
Yeah, and without competition, you can't bring the cost down. So that said, did anyone benefit from Obamacare?
Sure. There are people who did not have health insurance before who got subsidized and now get it as a result of the ACA. But we're talking a universe of maximum 20 million people, I would say, and some of those people could have gotten care other ways. Some of them were Medicaid eligible already but weren't taking advantage of it. But there's 320 million people in this country, and a lot of them saw their costs go up, they saw their choices reduced, and they saw more restrictions imposed upon healthcare. So it's not like the healthcare system got better for 320 million people, but there were some people who were subsidized and got healthcare as a result.
We're talking to Tevi Troy, former Deputy Secretary at Health and Human Services, White House aide. He's the author of the book, Shall We Wake the President? 2 Centuries of Disaster Management from the Oval Office. A lot of disaster creation from the Oval Office in the last 8 years. I wonder what you would advise the president to say, whether it's on Obamacare or maybe just kind of general tone and angle of incidents in his farewell speech tonight. If you were in the inner circle, batting around ideas with one Valerie Jarrett.
So my number one thing would be to go through it with a red pen and strike out the word "I." You've got to make it less about you. I know President Obama likes to make it about himself and often uses the first-person pronoun, but you got to make it more about the American people, what we're trying to accomplish, and where America is going in the world. But if it's just about him, then I think that's just an ego dance.
All right. And what, besides the killing of Osama bin Laden, what do you think President Obama accomplished while in office for 8 years?
Oh, I'm afraid to do a long pause on the radio.
Yeah, right.
It does remind me of the story when Richard Nixon was running for president and Eisenhower was asked about Nixon's top accomplishments as vice president, and Eisenhower said, "If you give me a week, I might think of one," which was really damaging to Nixon's campaign, but accurate in this case.
Yes, that was that was a question that has no answer, so don't feel bad. Tevi Troy, former HHS Deputy Secretary and the author of the book, Shall We Wake the President? 2 Centuries of Disaster Management from the Oval Office. Tevi, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.